This is the Mike Smyth Show.
All right, time for our great debate now, universal basic income. Now, this is really interesting. The Parliamentary Budget Office in Ottawa just reported out that a universal basic income system in Canada, where the government would guarantee everyone gets a minimum income, that would slash poverty rates here in Canada by 40%. Should we do it? What a great panel I've got standing by for you to discuss this, both sides of it. First, have a listen to global business leader Richard Branson. He thinks it's a good idea.
Basic minimum earnings for everybody so that there's nobody that is having to sleep on the street.
So guaranteed basic income or universal basic income.
100% think that's really important.
Well, there are people in this country who call that a nanny state, you know.
Some people will call it that, but I think that it will come about one day, and I think
out of necessity.
Out of necessity.
Yeah, so he thinks it's inevitable that one of these days we'll have a universal basic income. Should we do it here in Canada? Let's discuss both sides of it for you. Floyd Marinescu is on the line. Floyd is the founder of UBI Works. UBIWorks.ca is the website. Floyd, thank you.
Thank you. So I am the founder of UBI Works, and I'm also a businessman like Richard Branson. Just want to put this report in context. First of all, the Parliamentary Budget Office is simply asked to cost things. It's not a political party. It's not an actual plan for a basic income. It's just looking at what if you replaced over 50 credits and programs in the tax system that target low-income people with one basic income.
Okay. We've also got on the line, just let me get the other guests on the line here. Floyd, Kris Sims, Alberta Director, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thank you, Kris, for coming on.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, Floyd.
Hi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to both of you. Floyd, let me go back to you first. Now, make the case here for me. Can you briefly tell the listeners why you support this?
Well, I support a guaranteed basic income that would eliminate poverty, not cost the middle class, and actually improve our economic vitality. A basic income would grow the economy by more than it costs. I don't particularly support this particular proposal put out by the Parliamentary Budget Office. I would assume Kris doesn't either. The reason is that they're looking at tax credits that would cost almost 60% of families would have to pay more. There's just much better ways to pay for a basic income that was costed here. So this is not a plan for a basic income. It's just a costing that was asked for by a senator. Even Pierre Poilievre asked the PBO for information on basic income in the past. So it's important to take this as an example of what poverty costs as opposed to a specific plan for a basic income.
Okay, Kris Sims, your thoughts on universal basic income. What do you think of this idea?
Well, exactly to Floyd's point, I think it's important to point out that the PBO is basically an arm's length watchdog, I would argue, for the budget process in Ottawa. So it's good to have some strong numbers here coming from the PBO. The number that jumped out at me as a Taxpayers Federation representative is the gross cost of what they're proposing in this document. And it was about $112 billion for what the PBO would describe as a nuclear family. So two working parents plus minor children who are dependent. Then they also did a breakdown, which is interesting, where they kind of imagined that it's a different sort of household structure. So say you've got one or two or maybe three adults who are working, maybe a teenager who's working, and they described that as an economic family grouping. And they still found that it was a cost of $57 billion. And to pay for that, they tried to argue that the increase in income taxes collected by federal and provincial governments would offset that cost. Now, this is where my concern comes in, because the federal government, including the CRA, is really bad at doing things. They weren't even able to get their own payroll software right in Phoenix without blowing billions of taxpayer dollars. So while in theory, Milton Friedman's kind of pure approach to the idea of a negative income tax, meaning wipe away every single other social program and replace that with a form of negative income tax, that sounds plausible, but the devil's in the details here, Mike, and it sounds like it would just wind up costing us a ton of money that we don't have, which is the problem.
Okay, Floyd, so Kris has made the case for the cost of a program like this. The other common complaint that I hear about universal basic income is, would it just create this massive government bureaucracy, a massive welfare state, and be a disincentive for people to work? Like, why would people want to work if they know that they're guaranteed a basic income from the government? What do you say to that argument?
Okay, well, there's a few questions in there. First, I'll answer the first one you asked previously properly. We should have a basic income. We can eliminate poverty. We can create a system where entrepreneurs, single mothers, people that are retraining for work, starting businesses can actually afford to do that, can afford to fail without falling into poverty. We can have a system where one program replaces over 50. In the PBO program, they actually look at replacing provincial social assistance. It's one of their costing mechanisms. So, I kind of disagree a little bit with how Kris framed it. It's not about the increase in income taxes. Only one of the sources would do that. Most of those tax credits are actually paying for people's current poverty needs as it is. So you're replacing one program with another. So it is a simplification of government, would reduce complexity, which is why people in the civil service sector and even conservatives have been for this idea, one program instead of 50. And with regard to work incentive, there's been so many studies now. It's been put to bed by a long shot. It does not disincentivize work. You're talking about poverty level support. Only single mothers and students have been shown to work a bit less. And it's talking about like days per year, which is like a mom showing up for a student who's a child who's no longer in school because it's a day off instead of sending them to a daycare. It's not meaningful reduction in work. It's never been shown to cause a meaningful reduction in work.
Okay. Kris, what do you say to that?
I think that isn't addressing the experience that we had after a lockdown. And so we had problems, obviously, with some folks who were getting COVID payments, and then they were incorrectly getting COVID payments, including children in some cases, some folks who were in prison. There's a lot of administration room for error here that we're concerned about. And I feel like I might be arguing your point a little bit here, Floyd, that I'm trying to understand from the PBO. Based on what I'm reading here, the PBO is trying to mathematically assume that the increase in income taxes, because they would lower the threshold rather. So right now, say you're paying income taxes provincially and federally, up to a certain amount of income is when you start paying it. He's proposing in this document to lower that threshold, meaning you start paying income taxes sooner under this program. And he's saying that this would mathematically offset the cost that he's estimating in this. So both provincially and federally. Now, I don't have a lot of confidence that the governments would be able to actually do that and make it clear. But I just thought, I'm not trying to argue your point, Floyd, but it seems to be that he's trying to cost it out here, isn't he?
No serious basic income proposal in Canada includes reducing the basic personal amount. Not one I agree with.
Okay.
Okay. Let me jump in there, guys, as we fit in a quick break, and then we will come back with more. My guests are Floyd Marinescu and Kris Sims. We're talking about a universal basic income in Canada. Get set to phone me on the open line here now, because I want to hear from you. Is this something we should do? Have a listen to Karina Gould. This is a Liberal MP running for the federal Liberal leadership. She says, now, she's not going to win, but she has put this on the table. She would bring in a universal basic income in Canada. Have a listen to her.
Within 1 year of becoming Prime Minister, I would bring forward a plan to update our social safety net to really help Canadians. It means providing more supports to vulnerable seniors, and it means providing a dignified existence to people with disabilities. And it means setting us on a path towards a basic income in this country.
Okay, universal basic income. Is this a good idea? Phone me, let me know. Floyd Marinescu, Kris Sims are my guests. This is Mike Smyth, back with your calls. All right, we're talking about the campaign for a universal basic income in Canada. Should we do this? Can we afford it? Would it replace a lot of costly social programs that are on the books right now? We've got both sides of it for you today. Floyd Marinescu, UBI Works, Kris Sims, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Jean in Burnaby. Hi, Jean, go ahead.
I don't agree with the program. First of all, I don't think there's enough put together to understand it. Second of all, we have the minimum wage in place. We need to get something in place that want to put people wanting to work. And as long as the taxes keep going up against people, people don't want to work. Why should they give the government the money to do whatever they do with it, besides waste it a lot of times, as I see it? And they need to put incentives in place, lower our taxes on the more money you make. You pay all the same tax. I think I don't know if it's Australia, New Zealand, or somewhere over in Europe. They have a flat tax rate. The more money you make, the more money you keep. Everybody pays the same percentage. And from what I know, it gives a person an incentive of wanting to succeed and go further ahead in business.
Jean, thank you very much for the call. Thank you for the call. Floyd, what do you say to her?
It's important to know that a guaranteed basic income is about helping those in poverty and to not fall into poverty. We've seen evidence from many trials that people actually work more. People can afford to focus on school instead of working a second job when they're trying to be in school. Working class people can afford to have one job instead of three, cobbling it all together because they have this small supplement, which we've already agreed people need a supplement. There's already a working tax credit. It's just not enough. So this is actually about helping people have the means to be able to work a meaningful job, negotiate better wages, as we've seen happen in previous trials.
Okay, Kris, what do you think?
If we can't pay for this through the way that the PBO is suggesting here, I'm wondering how much this is going to cost taxpayers, because I think I need to remind people that we have unmoney right now. Our federal debt is $1.2 trillion. The Trudeau government doubled it. Like, we're paying more in interest, Mike, than we do on federal health transfers. Every nickel of the GST we're paying now is paying on the interest of our federal debt. Like, we don't have the cash to pay for this. And so this is where the concern really kicks in, is what is this going to replace and how could we possibly afford it? Maybe a smarter thing to do is to increase the basic personal amount more so fewer lower income people are paying taxes at all, and scrap the carbon tax. I think that would go a long way.
Back to the phone lines. Ken in Kelowna. Hi, Ken. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I was recently over in Europe, in Switzerland, and I went to pay a tip for a waiter that was there, and I was told you don't do that because they make a livable wage. I am in favor of everybody having a livable wage. However, I do agree with your other host or guest that we're in debt so much, and it's crazy. But you gotta incentivize people by taking that stress away from them and saying, hey, look, when you are a waiter or waitress, whatever you're doing, working at a building material place, that you make a livable wage so that you can take that stress off and be productive.
Okay, thank you for the call. Floyd, what do you say to that?
It's important to note that this is not about basic income versus a minimum wage. Sure, we should have a high minimum wage, but that leads people through the cracks. Contractors, people working cash jobs, people that currently just simply cannot make ends meet. So basic income is about long-term income security. Just because you have a minimum wage doesn't mean you can afford to go back and retrain for a better job or negotiate higher pay. This is about giving people the chance to say no to jobs or even family situations that are stressful, that are risky, because they know they have the financial security to better themselves.
Okay.
And totally agree. We have a problem with debt. We are spending too much in this country, but a basic income will grow the economy by more than it costs, can produce a lot of cost savings for the government, and help people train for the jobs of the future.
Okay, Kris, you get the rapidly running out of time. Kris, you get the last words here. You got 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I just really love this discussion because I think it's important to focus on the fact that people can't afford basics right now. For the first time I've ever witnessed in Canada, 50% of Canadians are now within $200 of not being able to make the basic and minimum payments on all of their bills. I'm highly concerned, though, that this would just become another big government boondoggle and not actually help low-income people.
Kris, thank you for coming on. Floyd, thank you for a great discussion. I want to thank both our guests. Floyd Marinescu, founder UBI Works. UBIWorks.ca is the website. Kris Sims is with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And that was our universal basic income debate today. Thank you for all the calls.